sometimes, I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes when I'm too quick with something, particularly on a television show, where time is an element, and what's coming back to me about this, Bobby Breen, I think, was a singer, and he was a little guy like me. I guess we were about to have 5'6". I was 5'6". Now, the last time I went to a doctor, and you get on the scale and they put the thing on your head, and you measure your height and weight at the same time. She said 5'4". I said, no, I'm 5'6".
Oh.
Yeah, bragging about my great height, right? 5'6". She said, no, it's 5'4". Well, of course, I had, again, forgot, in quotes, that you grow older, and what is it with your spine or something? You lose height. Wow. I lost 2 inches, which I said to the lady who was doing it. I said, I really can't afford those 2 inches, for God's sake. Anyway, I think Bobby Breen was about the same size, a little guy. Fat Jack Leonard was a fat guy, that's why he was called Fat Jack Leonard. And he, what's vague in my mind, he was a pretty famous or well-known name at the time. What he was well known for, I'm not sure. I think it was comic. I think he was a comedian. I know he wasn't a singer, or a dancer, so it must have been comedy. Anyway, I've made, look, I could write another book if I was younger about all the mistakes I've made in my life. And this was a mistake, obviously. We're on the Merv Griffin show. And like you said, he didn't let Bobby Breen talk. He overspoke him. As soon as Bobby Breen started to say something, Jack Leonard would make a joke or something. And Bobby couldn't handle it, So after a while, he just got quiet. So what happened when Merv turned to me and asked me a question, and I started to answer it, and Jack Leonard started to say something, boy, did I put him down, because I assumed he was going to do to me what he had been doing to Bobby Breen. So I'm pretty good at that. I wouldn't let him get, I said, Jack, you've had your moment. You want to keep your mouth shut. And when I'm finished, we can talk, and we can wait till after the show, and then you can talk to me. And then I hope I'm going to be taller so I can really talk to you. I really let him have it. And this is on the air, and he backed off. Right. The end of that piece, when I say I sometimes make a mistake, when the show was over and we're walking off stage, Fat Jack Leonard said to me, Harry, I wanted to tell you that I read one of your books and that I was so impressed and it was so good. I said, oh my God. I didn't let him get that out. I kind of put him down, insulted him, So, like I say, kiddingly, I could write a book about the mistakes I made, let's face it. So that was one of them. I apologized profusely. What are you going to do?
You've shared stories before where you were in a similar situation where people were actually, in fact, rude to you or trying to put you in place or downplay your abilities, and you kind of got used to defending yourself in certain cases. So,
thank you for saying that, Rudy, because that's very true. You meet all kinds of different people in the world. Most of the time, I met people that were always very nice to me, very flattering, etc. There are always people, I think I wrote about this somewhere. I don't think I did it in before I forget, but I know I did an article, again, somewhere, where people, I guess there were a few, fortunately, very few people who I guess, I'm not sure, were jealous of me, I guess, after I made an appearance and I got standing ovations or something. I noticed that as the years went by. It's interesting, the things you notice, like when I just said standing ovation, that reminded me of it. I got standing ovations quite often. One of the things that always, well, all right, maybe 98% of the time, got me a standing ovation is when I ended doing my magic square, So I remember very often, again, strike that, not very often, but quite a few times, I would finish, because I closed with that. People would stand up. I'd get a standing ovation. But the thing that sticks in my mind, I would occasionally see 1 or 2 people that did not stand up. Interesting, the things you notice. Not important at all. But I noticed that some people, would be sitting there with their arms crossed and wouldn't stand up. So I guess there's a little bit of jealousy involved when you're a performer. I assume all performers have things like that happen to them, but that's it. What are you going to do about it? It's part of life. It's part of showbiz, I guess.
So you had a friendship with Merv Griffin. I'm curious about how you became friends with Johnny Carson. I mean, the guy was a huge celebrity, and you were on the show something like 20 times or more than 20.
24 times.
Oh my gosh! So how did you?
That's what they told me, incidentally. It's very important. Again, people accused me of ego. They said, what'd you do? You counted all those times? I said, A, I didn't count them. B, I had to make a record of it for income tax purposes because I was paid to be on the show. So sure, I listed it in my book of appearances, etc. Obviously, but I didn't ever sit down when there were a lot listed there, over the years. I didn't sit down and count them. Somebody, either the last or next to last agent that called me, the agent for the show, called me. He asked me, he said, Harry, we want you, are you free on such and such a day, and blah, blah, blah. I said, of course. I look forward to seeing Johnny and doing the show. And he said, incidentally, Johnny wants to mention how many times you were on the show, Harry. He said, so how many times were you on? And that's what started. I said, I don't know. I didn't count them. So he said, oh, hold on a minute. And he kept me on the phone for about 5 minutes. I'm holding on. And he came back and said it was 23 times. Wow. So that the one I'm going to do now, that he's asking me, to do next week or whatever, will be 24 times. Wow. So that's how I do. I never counted them. So people that accuse me of my ego counting how many times they don't know what they're talking about.
So how did this happen where you had your first appearance on the Johnny Carson show?
Oh.
If you could talk about what that even was. I'd love to know, what was your first performance? What was that interaction like that led to him to say, I need to have this Harry Lorayne guy. I have to bring him back again and again. And then how did that develop into a friendship?
Well, it's an interesting question, Rudy. When I first started to do television, I mean, people, when I say people, I mean the hosts of shows, etc. A good example is Jack Parr. We can get into that later. But in one of my brochures, which is why I remember it so well, when Renee and I were doing the act, we had a brochure, Harry Lorayne and Renee, The Marvels of Memory. And part of the brochure was, who made Jack Parr say amazing, amazing, amazing 3 times? Because he did. That's what happened when I first started. People never heard of the concept of somebody remembering 1,000 names. It was an unknown concept. So when I originally did some of these shows, and the Jack Parr show is a whole big story. I don't know if I ever told it before, or when I'm finished with this, let me know if you want me to tell it. With Morse Hart was involved. It's a whole thing. But anyway, originally, when I did a show like the Johnny Carson show, most of the time they were a little nervous because their agents probably had told them, oh, we got this guy. Don't forget, my name was not known then. So they would say, we got this guy on the show that he says he can remember everybody's name. And at that time, and so I was told by a few people, they said, what? He's going to remember everybody on my show? How long is that going to take? An hour? I mean, what are you talking about? Because think about that. Think about before I was known, and nobody's ever seen it, and you say to a person that has, let's say, a 1 hour show or a half hour show, and his agent says, well, he's going to remember everybody's name, and the guy's going to say, wait a minute, I got 1,000 people in the order. What are you talking about? He's going to remember when he's going to meet him on a show. That takes an hour. They said, no, he meets him before. Oh, in other words, people had to think about it to say, what are you talking about? He remembers. Okay, so I had to get past that. And what happened when I did a show like the Johnny Carson show the first time, I felt, I'm trying to think of the word, not reluctance comes to mind, or reluctant maybe that they had booked this guy, meaning me, because they knew that they were going to, what was planned, they're going to talk to me when you're sitting on what they call the first seat, next to the desk, where the host is sitting. And they know they're supposed to talk to you. They had it all timed. We're going to talk for 3 minutes, and then you're going to get up and do your thing. and there's a guy ready with a microphone to hand it to me when I get up. Of course, I said I have to walk into the audience, all prepared. But when the guy's interviewing me, and this is at the very beginning, obviously, not now. Now they know who I am, and it's a whole different situation. But at first, and Johnny Carson was one of them, there was a reluctance. There was a feeling I got where they were a little nervous about talking for the 3 minutes or the 4 minutes, whatever, and then saying, okay, what is it you're going to do now? And they knew they were good. I was supposed to get up and remember everybody's name. They were very nervous about it because I hadn't proved it to anybody at this time yet. So anyway, the first time I did it, like I told you, when Jack Parr, who was very rude to me at first, after that, he said, amazing. He was calling me pal backstage before we went on the show, calling me pal. And I realized if he didn't like you very much, he called you pal, and I was calling him Mr. Parr in return. But when I finished calling everybody's name, he yelled at me, Mr. Lorayne, come on down. We got to get off the air. He called me Mr. Lorayne now because I have called 400 names, 400 people. So, yeah, Johnny was very pleasantly surprised. And I think it must have been 2 weeks later when I was booked again.
To do the same thing?
Yeah, just well, the main reason that I was booked on most of the shows is when I had a new book come out. So the publishers, publicity people, they would arrange it. They would call all the people all over America to book me on these shows to plug the book. Right. And they would say, Mr. Lorayne has written the book. It's called blah, 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 and blah. And when he comes on, he'll do his thing or just interview him. He's a very interesting guy. I heard a publicity guy say that once. So it was nice to know that people thought I was a pretty interesting guy. I mean, a lot of these publicity shows, when a book came out that I did all over the country, there was no audience. In other words, I couldn't do my thing. I couldn't remember the names. There were no people there. There was no audience. But it seems that I was a pretty interesting guest.
I think back to when I first met you. In my mind, you're a big star. So when I met you, I was starstruck, and going out to dinner with you, I will always remember that. I'm wondering for you, what was that moment when you got the call from Johnny saying, hey, let's go have a bite to eat? Were you starstruck? Were you?
Well, what you're asking is what happened, but it happened after maybe in New York City. Don't forget that when I started to do the show, the Carson show for most of the years was out of the West Coast, but at the beginning it was out of New York, where I lived. It was easy for me to do the show. But anyway, it was maybe after the third or fourth time that I did it, Rudy. Those things I always count on, but I know it was very early in our, knowing each other, where he said, Harry, hang around after, wait till I finish the show. We'll go grab a bite together, or excuse me, you'll go have a drink together. That's what started it. He started it. There was no way I would have said to Jack, I've written this, or I've said it quite often. I said, look, I know I'm stupid, but I ain't that stupid. I was going to say I'm not about to say to Johnny Carson, hey, Johnny, when you finish, you want to have a drink? So he said to me, hang around, Harry, after your piece, and we'll go out and have a drink. And that's what started. It started in New York. And then as time went on, I would do his show out of California. And he said to me, again, after the second or third time in California, he said, Harry, when you're in California, when you're here in Los Angeles, for one of your appearances, even if you're not on the show, give me a call. And he gave me his home number. He said, give me a call, and if I'm free, we'll have dinner or whatever. So that's how the friendship started. He said, call me, even if you're not on the show. And I think I told you the story about me bringing him to the Magic Castle, because he was interested in magic at the beginning, but mainly in ventriloquism. He wanted to be a ventriloquist. He was born in Nebraska, and he wanted to be in showbiz, and he thought he'd be a ventriloquist, and he got interested from the ventriloquist thing to magic. So anyway, we became pretty close. Now, I didn't hear what you said. Did I mention when I took him to the Magic Castle?
I think it's worth telling again in case anybody missed it, because it's
Well, I said, come on, Johnny, we're going to Magic. I'm I don't know what they call it. I'm an honored member,
Mhm.
of the Magic Castle. And I'm allowed to bring friends, and I have cards that I could send. Like if you were in California, in Los Angeles, and you wanted to go to the Magic Castle, but you're not a member, if you told me a week before, I can mail you a card that I have a bunch of. I don't know if they're still good. I've had them for years. That I can mail to you, and that card would let you in. In other words, they gave me that privilege of letting a friend in by giving him one of these cards. So anyway, the story is we had finished the show, I guess, and I want to bring Johnny because he's interested in magic. And I asked him, have you ever been to the Magic Castle? He said, no, I'd love to see it. I said, come on, because I'm a lifetime member, blah, blah, blah. I didn't think there'd be any problem. We'd take you in. Well, we go to the Magic Castle. Anyway, there are two ladies at the counter, at least they were then. They wouldn't let him in. They said, no, we can't let you in. I said, you're talking to Johnny, he was on the air then. It's not as if he was retired. I said, you're talking to Johnny Carson. What are you talking about? No, we can't because he's wearing a turtleneck. In other words, the rule was for men, shirt and tie. They wouldn't let Johnny Carson in.
So I don't know if this is true. I think I heard somewhere that Johnny Carson was really shy. Is that true? Was he quirky? Were there certain personality traits?
Certain personality, you just said it. That's the key. For some reason, with certain personalities, not necessarily well-known personality, I can't pinpoint this. I never asked him, why did you act shy for that person, not that person? I would never ask him that. But yeah, for certain people, he acted shy. Now, the truth of the matter is, whether he was doing this on purpose or not, I don't know. Johnny was a pretty good actor. I don't mean Johnny did a movie role, but I mean in life, he was a pretty good actor. And he may have been acting this shyness because he thought it made the person feel better. I don't know. So he may have been doing that on purpose. Because basically, come on, Johnny Carson in quotes, what has it got to be shy about,
Yeah, right.
So that didn't make much sense to me. But we spent a lot of time together when we got friendly with Mel Brooks, with Carl Reiner, with other friends. Mel Brooks was, of course, my closest friend ever. Carl Reiner, next close friend, and Johnny, of course. So we'd get together with one or two other people, friends of theirs or friends of Johnny. I remember when it first started, after a while she knew better. I traveled with Renee, and I remember once we were in a hotel room, and I must have told Johnny I was going to be there, and which hotel I was going to be staying at. Anyway, the phone rings. She picks it up. I'm shaving or something. And she picks up the phone, and I hear her say, yeah, sure. Hold on. She said, Harry, it's Johnny Carson. Yeah. She didn't believe at first. That was